Hi, and welcome back to the Teams Insider podcast. This week we take a walk down memory lane. I talk to Jim Gaynor, who's Editorial Vice President at Directions on Microsoft. We talk about Microsoft's Teams launch, the competitive landscape, what's happened over the years, the massive growth, the pandemic impact, right up to date with what's happening with Teams Premium, and also Microsoft's massive pivot towards Copilot. Really interesting conversation with Jim. He's covered the space for many years. Really enjoyed talking to him. Many thanks for him taking the time to jump on the podcast. And also many thanks to Audio Code, who are the sponsor of this podcast. Really appreciate all their support. On with the show. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Excited to have this conversation. I had an awesome prep call with Jim. We probably could have talked for an hour in the prep call. So we're going to get into some Teams Premium conversation, Microsoft Journey conversation. But first off, Jim, do you just want to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. So I'm Jim Gaynor. I'm the Vice President of Research. Titles are free at Directions on Microsoft. I lead our editorial team, so I'm kind of responsible for checking the tone of our overall coverage, where things land. But then we've got editorial, we've got editorial, we've got advisory, we've got training. So yeah, that's what I do. But fortunately, I still get to write about things, and Teams is my beat. I've been covering Teams since it first came out in 2017. Was a user of Slack and other things as well. I was helping support Skype for Business back when it was still Link and Office Communication Service. So
And you're
yeah.
you're over 8 years at Directions on Microsoft, so a long run of focus on Microsoft and helping people understand it.
Yeah. I've been at Direction since 2017. I've been in IT, both in higher education and in enterprise work since the early 1990s. So, lots of places around there. And
Awesome.
I've been writing a little bit about it on the side here and there since the days of Usenet.
That's going back a bit now.
I've earned the gray hairs.
So I'd love to hear from your perspective that Teams journey. Like you were, say you were covering it from the start when it was kind of the Slack compete conversation.
Oh yeah. So when it first came out, Slack was eating everything, it seemed like, and it was all about we were talking a lot about persistent text-based communication, because back then, one of the big comments we'd have, when we were using Skype for Business, even, was like, okay, so we've got these situation rooms because there's an event going on, but none of it's persistent. If someone like left the room and came back in, like, it wasn't still there anymore. But Slack was, you've got this persistent threaded chat. You can come back to it. You can return, and and then the ecosystem that helped foster was something that Microsoft hadn't addressed. And so in 2017, they announced Teams, and they said intelligently, and not long after, they said pretty intelligently that, well, Teams will also eventually replace Skype for Business, which makes sense. They've got all of this they were using, and they've already had the back end of Skype for Business online. And they said, well, we'll bring that in. And that was the journey going on for a good number of years. They were bringing in more of the telephony items, and
Because for those who don't
Teams.
remember,
Yep.
Teams launched as just chat and chat rooms. Like that was the very first instance. We didn't even have meetings initially, and then it was meetings. Then it was calling.
Correct. Yeah. That's all it was. And because that's what people really wanted. They added that in later. But the one thing that Teams always had was it was a conglomerate application. It wasn't like, yes, there's the underlying Teams service which lives in Azure, but Teams itself is put together of all these different things, which is what Microsoft does. They reuse what they've got. So you're using, back then, Azure AD, now Entra ID for your authentication. You're using Microsoft 365 groups for your groups. You're using SharePoint Online and OneDrive for your storage. It's all of these other things that they then put together to make a nice, conglomerate service. And that's continued onward with Teams. So okay, so it's just text-based chat. We're just competing with Slack, and then we're going to bring our telephony stuff in here because we want to put all our eggs in one basket. And Teams is really hot, so we want to keep doing that. And then the pandemic hit, and remote work exploded. As you well know,
Yeah.
everybody here, everybody who's listening to us knows. And suddenly it wasn't about fighting off Slack, it was about Zoom. It was about remote meetings. And that's where you started seeing, I mean, the immediate things were things like, oh, I can only have this many people in a meeting. Zoom lets me do this. So you suddenly saw all of that being attacked.
Yeah, I love that like competitive scenario because Microsoft are at their best when they're in a compete situation, I think. And it was like, yeah, you got to give credit to Zoom. They stole a march on some great features, but
Yeah.
it was very very fast. It felt like the whole of Microsoft mobilized during the pandemic, and it was just like this is the thing.
Well, you can, I mean, yeah, you can look at what they've done for a lot of things. Oh yeah, that's just been so great. When they're the underdog, when they feel like they've got to fight back, is really when they get going hard. And as a side comment, it's interesting because they'll have the dominant position, but still want to be treated like the underdog, which that can be a little bit odd. Like you own the market, you're not the scrappy person who's being repressed. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll get onto the AI conversation in a bit because
yeah,
that's a whole different one. But yeah,
yeah,
so the other thing I think is interesting about the pandemic period is like
yeah.
there was still in the early days, it wasn't a foregone conclusion for lots of customers. Like lots of customers were happy with Skype for Business. That
Hmm.
was their platform. And the pandemic
Hmm.
really changed that. It was like, oh, we need to scale way beyond what we thought was individual customers. And then Microsoft, they never could have scaled the Skype Business Online infrastructure like that. It just wasn't
No.
built like that. So it felt like fortunately, a really good bet to have that kind of cloud centric architecture.
Yeah, yeah, because it was very good timing. What was funny, do you remember though how they talked about how um, early on in the days of the pandemic that what was it? Government in the government cloud. So this is obviously, US. Um, Parts of the government infrastructure were actually being hosted in public cloud for a bit.
Oh, because they had to burst out. They didn't have enough pure infrastructure. That's interesting.
Exactly, exactly, because they were slamming so much infrastructure at it. Because not only did you have everybody adopting Teams, you also had people doing lift and shifts of moving their infrastructure to the cloud and everything at the same time, and it all shares that same infrastructure in Azure. But yeah, they ramped things up so quickly. They went from 300 meet. I mean, what is it now? You can have 10,000 people in a Teams meeting. Only 1,000 are interactive. The rest are kind of in a
Yeah.
viewing mode. Whereas the original limit was like 250.
Yep. Yeah. And it was a big
So
deal when we pushed it up to 300 and then 350. That was like a big deal at the time.
yeah. So watching that happen, and that became the thing. So hybrid work was the thing for several years. And now we're getting into what you hinted at earlier is like, okay, so Teams is it. Teams is the platform. I remember Ignite 2022, Satya talking about Teams. Teams isn't the product. Teams is a platform. We're going to
Yeah,
develop
yeah.
on
It was
Teams.
basically positioned as an OS at one point. It was like well, everything and this is what happens with Microsoft. When you're hot, you're hot. Like that's the center of the world.
Hmm. And then by spring of 2023, well, that wasn't the center of the world anymore.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
Copilot. That was AI. Um, and Teams, at least though, was still focused because I mean, you can go. Let's rewind again for a second. Go back to 2017, and what was Teams actually being used for too? Remember chatbots? Remember natural language interfaces? Remember how hot chatbots were in 2016 and 2017?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that was the thing. And then suddenly here comes
Collaboration
AI.
enabled business process, CEBP. We were talking about bots. It was bots were going to be everything.
Yeah, bots and pages, and then suddenly that went away because. So it's funny how there's always like this is going to be the big thing. Oh, maybe not this, but you still come back and cannibalize isn't the right word, but you have parts of that you bring forward and then glom on to help build this new conglomerate
Yeah,
that moves you forward. So here you have Teams, which now has amazing penetration due to its adoption during the pandemic, and Teams at the initial level starts to become one of the interfaces to Copilot.
yeah. And I think potentially one of the key interfaces in the sense of you've already got people who are chat centric and it's a
Hmm.
modern client platform, so it has that ability to, as you say, the bot story. Now bots are agents because agents is the cool word, but I mean it's the same
Yeah.
frameworks.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting now, and during that period we had kind of a brief like Viva's the hotness, and then it was like, oh no, wait, no, that hasn't
Yeah.
really gone. AI's the hotness, but I think it's interesting now to see Teams isn't the primary focus. It's still obviously a very important platform, but definitely AI is.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we talked about during the preview during the testing call too, is now Teams isn't the hotness, but it's about using that and getting more revenue out of it. getting more things out of it. Because now
Yeah.
we had Teams Premium that was announced back in 2022, in early 2022, and Intelligent Recap is still, I think, one of the one of the killer
Yeah.
uses of Copilot and the use of machine learning forward. That's the big thing we are. We're like, well, how do I get that? We actually had to write a report about people who were, well, do I have to have Copilot to get Intelligent Recap? No, you can just get it with Teams Premium. It's cheaper that way. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, we had
Um,
Mary Jo on the podcast. She was saying a big part of directions for a while, when they're probably still now, is explaining the fast movingness of what's premium, what's Copilot, what are all the other add-on SKUs, because we had this explosion of add-ons and bolt-ons and extras.
it's still happening. It's still happening. When we're talking now about the differences between Microsoft 365 Copilot and Microsoft 365 Chat, and all of that keeps moving around. And that's part of it, is that we're quickly adopting what's going on. But with Teams, now that Copilot is the golden child, and Copilot is where Microsoft is looking for adoption. Um, we just had some stuff, some information that we got saying that Microsoft's the spiffs, the bonuses they give to partners to help customers adopt things are now pretty much focused entirely on AI. Those are the stories they want to tell. Like, well, we'll
Yep.
give you money to help a customer journey if it's involved with AI. Whereas before it was like, hey, can we get them involved in Teams? Can we get them involved? Remember when it was blockchain? So it's that. So with Copilot being that golden child now, Teams now shifts from being we're pushing adoption to we're trying to increase revenue per user, the magic ARPU. And so you see things like Teams Premium. You see things like Teams Rooms. You see more features getting pushed into Teams Premium. We've got the Queues app,
Yeah.
and which is nice. It's great for a company that wants to do a small, call center thing. But if you want it, well, you better have Teams Premium. You're doing Places. Places is kind of good for introductory facilities management and people management. But if you want to get it, you need Teams Premium. Oh, and by the way, you also probably need Teams Rooms too, and Teams Pro devices and things.
Yeah, it definitely feels like everything fancy now. It's like the bar is Teams in Core is fine for most people, but if you want the everything fancy and new, just expect it to be in premium almost, and be pleased if it's not, rather than the other way around.
Yeah, pretty much. But they're still trying to refine it. That's the thing too, is that it, let me, before I go there, one other thing you're seeing is um, a lot of when they were trying to push adoption, they pushed a lot on, well, here, we'll give you these things for free. Oh, here's all these connectors. Remember all that when they were making connectors to everything into Teams? So, oh, you've
Yep.
got Dropbox, we'll connect that in. And they're slowly winding back now support for a lot of those connectors and saying instead, well, you can just do a flow, do a Power App for it. And again, that's something else like, oh, well, you've got to pay a bit more money for those. Every run of a flow comes with a cost. So it's more, so again, that's the move from when they're pushing adoption, they'll give you all the things for free. They'll make it plug in and interoperate with everything. But when you start moving to it's a mature product and we want to increase the revenue per user, then it's well, how can we use it? How can we leverage this bully pulpit that we have
Yeah.
for other things?
Yeah, definitely. Not a charity. There's always an opportunity potentially to revenue, and that's kind of part of the whole Microsoft 365 journey as well. The whole everything's in E5, and now actually a lot of things are broken out beyond E5 as well, as they've looked to monetize different scenarios.
Wes Miller, another one of our analysts. You should talk to. Have you talked to Wes?
Yeah. I
You
have
should. Yeah.
actually he's I've been DMing on the Twitter. We were talking about getting him in the pod as well.
Oh, that would be great. Wes has long hypothesized, like, when are we going to see E7? That's
Yeah,
one thing he likes to talk about.
see, my theory with that is we never will, because of the EU and Competition Commission. Like, Microsoft gets so much grief for bundling. I think
Yeah.
Microsoft have worked out actually they can make more money by not bundling than bundling. So I just don't think they need the grief.
Yeah, they've done. Yeah, exactly. They don't need the grief because they're definitely getting the grief from the EU. But like the airlines, they've discovered that they can make more money charging you a la carte for everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Although
So
you end
let's
up. Go ahead.
I'll say let's get into that the Copilot conversation, because I think it's really interesting. And for you, obviously follow the space. I follow the
Yep.
space. Like the whole, I don't think anybody could have foreseen where we are now in that OpenAI relationship. And I'm so glad that Microsoft are, for better or worse, in the game. Like, there could have been a scenario
Yeah.
if they didn't have that OpenAI relationship where they were kind of
Oh
this,
yeah.
like, the Appley, a bit fumbly type scenario, but actually they're
Mhm.
bang in the conversation, which is great to see.
Yeah. And can I share a story
Please.
briefly? So when I was at Ignite in 2018, I was there as an analyst, and a handful of us got rounded up by analyst relations. And they're like, okay, we need you to meet at this place and don't tell anybody. Oh, okay. And then they get us all there, and one of the handlers comes and takes us all. And we get taken off to someplace way away from all the normal halls. We got people around us, and we get all shuffled into this relatively small room. Like, are we okay? And Satya walks in, and we get this brief period with Satya, and it was great because we was talking to him, and it was a much more unguarded conversation. It sounded like we were talking to a person as opposed to the guy who's spouting vision up on
Yeah.
the stage. And one of the things that got him so excited that you could just see that he was excited about was AI, as he was talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Even then,
And that's interesting to hear because that is
yeah,
way before the kind of public peak of the
exactly.
conversation.
Exactly. And so it doesn't surprise me that they were in the game. That's obviously something that he's interested in back then. So when I started seeing all this, like, well, that makes sense. Um, but it's still, yeah, it's very much interesting that they're in the game. It's very good for Microsoft and their customers that they're in the game. And Microsoft does have the position of, yes, they're pushing AI and everything, but they're still looking at AI. I don't know if you quite want to say it this way. It's not a, it's still a feature that ties into everything else they've got because they've got all your email, they've got all your documents, they've got all your SharePoint stuff, they've got the entire business context. They have identity already there. Wes will go on about how identity is like the thing to have, and other analysts will too. Um, they've already got controls for, okay, if you actually are getting in and managing your data, which is one of the most important things you want to
Yeah.
do if you're adopting AI, is do that kind of data management.
And they've
Yeah,
got the customer's trust, right? Because you've already given them your email and your data and your meetings and your calls, right? So you're like,
yeah.
I've already trusted you with my most important asset. So actually, who do I trust for the AI conversation? Like, do I bring in somebody else, or do I also trust you?
And if the AI is going to be really useful to you, it needs that context. So
100%.
so you've already entrusted Microsoft with all of your stuff, and then you can say, okay, well, we're adopting Copilot, and now here's all my stuff. Whereas if you're with OpenAI, it's well, then I have to give them to really make use of it for your business. You have to give it insight to all of your stuff. If you're working with Anthropic, whoever you're working with, you have to give them insight to all your stuff. And Microsoft's like, we've already got your stuff. You've already
Yeah.
entrusted us with it.
Yeah. It's
Um,
interesting. I feel like we're very much in that, like, Zoom Teams or Slack Teams kind of competitive scenario again, though, because the OpenAI definitely stealing the mindshare march. And
yeah.
I think a lot of early adopters obviously jumped to OpenAI because that ChatGPT brand is almost synonymous with AI in the public domain. And you
Oh
say
yeah.
Microsoft have got all these infrastructure and trust advantages, but it still feels like there's a lot of effort. And as you said, this FY we've just come into, there's an even harder focus on it's all AI, it's all agents. So
But they
I think
can.
we're on.
I was going to say they can afford to play a slightly longer game. I mean, that's what they did with Teams, right? They
Yeah,
one of the common things that Microsoft has is, well, they have Office and Windows, which is the cash cow that can kind of subsidize all these other things. It's been interesting though because AI has all of it's got a lot of the capex. It has the full-on infrastructure, massive infrastructure
yeah,
requirements, which is why you're seeing some of the developments with Microsoft lately. It's that, well, they have, if they're going to do what they want to do, they have to invest massively in these capital expenditures for data centers and GPUs and everything that comes on doing all of that. And that's where so much of their money is going, and they're, you know, ruthlessly pruning other things so they
yeah,
can
yeah,
focus on
yeah.
this.
Yeah, it's an absolute, like we say, the certainly the roles they've cut recently, the moving around they're doing, the product prioritization. I also think
Yeah.
it's interesting with Microsoft because they're somewhat interestingly positioned in all that infrastructure investment in that they can leverage it for their first party products and they can
Yeah.
sell it as obviously infrastructure for third parties as well on the Azure service. So they've kind of got two bets on infrastructure. One is we're going to need it anyway, and the other one is we're going to be a serving other people doing AI on our cloud.
Well, that's even OpenAI.
Yeah.
That's most of their use. That was part of Microsoft's deal. Like, well, you're going to use primarily Azure. So much it's kind of funny because, okay, so Microsoft invests in OpenAI, who turns around and and buys Azure. So it's like, well, we give you money to give us money.
Yeah, yeah. So it turns out to have been quite a smart bet by all accounts in terms of
Yeah.
what the stake is now worth. I think it's 49% or something of that business is already
And
just worth an obscene amount of money.
yeah, well, it's and the level of that investment was seen when there was all the thrash about Sam Altman possibly leaving the board and whether or not he would come out of Microsoft. And even now, when OpenAI is talking about going, switching to a more for-profit structure, um, we don't need to go into all of that. There's probably better people you can talk to get all of those details. But it's interesting to watch. But it emphasizes how well Microsoft got into that game early on,
Mm.
and to a certain extent, how much OpenAI is dependent upon them,
I
which is
love
very good
your
for Microsoft.
Yeah, yeah. I love your perspective on the long game as well. That's really an interesting point, isn't it? Because if you look at AI, and like I'm following the space, like each week a different model is slightly ahead. Like Grok slightly ahead, Anthropic is slightly ahead, OpenAI is slightly ahead.
Hmm.
But within months, they're all back within the same kind of shooting match. So even if
Yeah,
you see something on one of the other models, you think, oh, Microsoft can't do that. 6 months time, it kind of seems to level out. And you say if they've got the trust and they've got the mind share and it's all in one box, then if you're a customer, you can sort of say, well, okay, this ABC product might have an edge now, but give it six
yeah.
months, it's going to be a wash.
And if it isn't, I mean, you can get Grok on Azure.
Yeah,
There's the thing is like there's like, well, maybe okay, so maybe you don't want Copilot for every use. You do want OpenAI, or you do want these other models for that use. That's fine. It's on Azure. We've got the
yeah,
infrastructure side too. We've got the data center
yeah,
side too.
yeah. Which
We'd love
again
to sell
feels
you this.
feels very Satya, doesn't it? It's like we love Linux, we love whatever runs on Azure. We're fine with that. Same thing with the models. As long as it's running on Azure, we're all good.
Exactly, exactly. It's to bring it back to Teams. It's like, well, you've got Teams. We'll give you these things. There was one of the things I was when I mentioned queues and places. Queues to me specifically. It's a good enough application. It's not if you want a full-on customer contact center, it's not there,
Yeah,
but it's good enough. It's like, okay, cool. You're using Teams. We're that. And if you want to use us for a contact management system, there's that. But then they're also building in integrations so that if you want to use a third parties because it's more full featured, well, fine, use their stuff, but you're still using Teams. They're happy to let partners take some of the dollars for the more niche cases, but the main thrust of it, like, well, we want to own the main thrust of it. And if you're still on our platform, you're still on our platform, and then we can leverage those integrations for other things.
yeah. Far better to have a bunch of partners also saying, yeah, Teams is great, and you can do this with us than trying to push them off the core platform. So yeah, totally.
Mhm. Yeah, even one of the things I used to cover before I moved into this role was I was covering Windows Server, but also Azure Arc. And that's a total divergence for the people who come here to talk about Teams. But Azure Arc is basically a place like, okay, so all these Azure management services you have for managing your VMs and infrastructure, well, yeah, you put Azure Arc on your system, and it doesn't matter if that VM is in AWS or Google or wherever, you still come back and you can use your Azure services to manage it.
Well, it's interesting. It's not that much of a leap because if you look at the Microsoft 365 local story and what they're kind of pitching as
Mhm.
conceptually the server products on the subscription, and obviously that will be Skype for Business, it won't be Teams, but like
Yeah,
actually, as long as you're paying a subscription, if you want to run this private infrastructure, that's okay too.
yeah, yeah. That's it's it's a mar- I, yes, it's a marvel to watch. It's a very intelligent business, and it goes all that strategy goes all the way back to when they first bundled Office in the 1990s. It's not the Slack before it. We can bring it back to Teams. Slack was best of breed focused. Teams still has some places where I think that it does not match up to play things like Slack or even things like Discord, for example. But Teams has all your stuff. Teams ties into your SharePoint, into your
Yeah.
identity, into your documents, into all of those things, whereas those are still maybe they're better for specific purpose, but they're siloed.
Yeah, and that tie-in, like you can obviously
Mhm.
set up Slack and do some integration. Same thing with ChatGPT. Like there's some graph
Mhm.
connectors now, but you've got to
Yep.
then do the work and connect it and run it and manage it. And you've got two data stories, two vendor stories. So this like
Mhm.
it all, for better or worse, it all just works together. Is such a compelling story for enterprise. It's like, well, I know what I'm getting, I know who I'm trusting, and we're broadly on this journey together of everything, in one box.
And Microsoft does intelligently make it that, going with them is the path of least friction, you know.
Yeah,
And also well, once you're in, like, oh, so you want to connect us to this thing? That's fine. You're using that thing and you want to connect us to that? That's fine. But then once you're using the thing that you're connecting to us with, well, that has, again, the conglomerate. It's attached to, okay, oh, so you're using this. Well, you'll need identity on this. So you'll need your Entra ID. You want to manage your Entra IDs. Okay, so you need P2, and now you need to have certain levels, certain security products and other things. So there's, the octopus reaches its
yeah.
tentacles out and reaches into your wallet.
Definitely. And Jim, what are you hearing from customers as far as the Copilot conversation goes? I'd be interested to know what you're hearing, because I know you're doing a lot of work around that as well.
There's a lot of confusion. I mean, really, that's it. They want to know how to manage it. It's gone, there's one set of customers who are still looking at proof of concept, right? They're looking at that. But then the kind of customers that we're dealing with mostly are large enterprise customers. So they don't move so quick, they don't adopt so quickly as people in the Silicon Valley space and that kind of, tech fast moving VC space. Um, but now they're looking at it, they're looking at needing it, and for them it's well, that's nice that we've got Copilot, but what about the controls? What about I have to do a legal hold on it? Um, what's all this I'm hearing? How do I make sure it's secured? And you're hearing more about using malicious prompts now to get information. How do I ensure that it's not getting to information that I don't want it to? Because that was one of the first things. I remember when Google was making search appliances that you could run on your local area network, and it would find all these things and be like, oh my God, it
Yeah,
can't
yeah, yeah.
expose that in a search. And Copilot's doing the same thing.
Yeah, we had it with
Um,
Delve as well. Do you remember, like, for the shortest time, Delve was just surfacing all sorts of stuff, and it's like, oh, maybe
yeah,
not.
like, no, I don't want it to know that I'm doing that. And so that comes back to the same thing. So for a lot of the customers, they want to get Copilot. They want to know that their data is both in it. How can we get our data in it to get the context? But how can we be safe about it? Um, how do we bring our data in? We've talked a bit about, there was RAG was the big thing, but now there's the new protocols. A to A, I think, is one for agentic,
Yep.
and MCP. MCP is the other one
Yeah.
that's coming out now.
Yeah, MCP
So
is
to
really
talk about that,
exciting as a like, seems like early days in what I've tested, but like the premise that you can start to attach those application interfaces directly into the chat is really cool.
yeah, it's like we had a couple of people internally when Microsoft announced that, okay, we've got an MCP for Learn. And people are like, oh, that's, they could just query that. And who would need somebody like what Directions does when you can just query Learn and have it give you all the stuff? It's like, yeah, you realize how much outdated information is in Learn?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think we're safe.
I think all of us are safe for the time being. Um, One other thing that we do still hear that we're hearing a lot is also about ROI. How do I actually, okay, we've got Copilot. How do I actually measure and tell upper management that we're getting our money's worth? Whether it's, are we, what improvements are we seeing? What kind of productivity are we measuring? It's not the how do I do it sometimes. It's more how am I justifying this?
Yeah.
Because for so many companies out there, the turn in economy in the past couple of years has been very dramatic, and they're being told, well, AI is the future, I've got to adopt AI, but then they're like, well, how do I prove that this is helping my business?
Yeah,
And
I'm
it's
hearing
still.
similar things from the
Mhm.
organizations I talk to. Like, they know AI is going to have an impact. So legal in particular has been really interesting. Like, loads of legal companies are really getting into it. And part of
Mhm.
it is that ROI story, but also part of it is we know we need to get our people using AI. So how do we drive that adoption? So it's kind of like get the money out of our investment, but also change the culture to get people using it, because we're going to get left behind.
And one thing that worries me a little bit about this is a lot of the a lot of the business. visible benefits of AI in general, this includes Copilot, this includes OpenAI, this, whatever, um, is based a little bit on a information disparity. I'm an early adopter, and thus I can do certain things faster using AI than people who are still doing it traditionally can do. But I'm still charging the rates that it's charged for people who are doing it traditionally. And once everybody has the same tool, then the playing field levels again. I don't know if you remember the early days of eBay when in the States, you had a group of people who would go off to the countryside and go antiquing and then take their haul and they'd sell it on eBay at a huge markup because they had much greater exposure to all these audiences. And then once everybody figured out eBay and those markets figured out eBay, then that collapsed. It was they had an asymmetrical advantage.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see some of that with AI. There's companies that are trying to adopt it very quickly to have an asymmetrical advantage, but eventually it's going to be a level playing field again. So
Yeah, yeah. Well,
one
that's
thing
where
I
the
kind
interesting
of
thing is in legal is you
yeah,
can't, if that is going to be true and it feels like it is on some timeline, you can't
mhm.
be the firm that didn't go on the journey because suddenly you're disadvantaged when everybody else has set that new bar.
Yeah, but the other side is just because you're an early adopter, don't expect that early adopter advantage to continue because eventually the playing field is going to catch
Yeah,
up with you.
yeah, that's a good point.
So
Awesome. Oh, Jim, thanks so much for taking the time. I really enjoyed the journey story. It's nice to hear from your perspective. It's like we're both following along from opposite sides of the world, the same story. So it's nice to hear your
yeah,
perspective on it.
it's always good talking to you.
Awesome. Well, no doubt get you on again. Maybe catch up, see where Teams is in next year or something, and have another chat.
Should be interesting. Should be interesting. It's fun. It's interesting watching how they're continuing to refine things. And Microsoft does always ship a certain version of their own internal use and their own internal org structure, and that's changing a lot. So it'll be interesting to see how it changes those products. So be happy to check in with you later.
Awesome. Thanks so much.